Marvel and DC Chaos, Dumbledore powers unleashed across universes. Episode 31. The top floor of the gunfire resounded in the last second, and at this time it became deathly quiet. Pierce slowly raised his head. Just when he thought that he had killed the enemy, he found that all the Hydra agents outside the door were trembling, and their eyes were full of fear. Preston's heart jumped wildly, and he looked back sharply. Then he saw hundreds of butterflies flying around Russell, flying towards the door, and turned into orange-yellow bullets the moment he approached Agent Hydra. The bullet storm reappeared and loomed over their owners. Bang bang! With blood splattering, 7 or 8 bodies fell to the ground. At this moment, Pierce's body trembled constantly, and there was no other emotion in his eyes except fear. His worldview collapsed. Monster! Pierce wailed and jerked up to escape, but then a vine appeared, instantly wrapped around his ankles. Pierce fell violently to the ground, his head made intimate contact with the marble floor, and instantly began to flow red blood, and his body stopped moving. Nick Fury walked over, touched the other party's artery, and shook his head with a complicated expression. I didn't expect you to die in this way, it's really sad. Especially the other party's Hydra slogan. At this time, the comparison seems to be more mocking. However, the most important thing now is not this. In Nick Fury's opinion, Russell should have just saved Pierce, but not for mercy, but to torture the identity of the Hydra high level. Otherwise, even if Pierce dies, it will still be trouble. As for the small shrimp below, there is basically no loyalty, but it is very easy to handle. But just when he was still regretting, he saw Russell walk up to Pierce's body. The next moment, the ring on Russell's finger transformed into a magic wand, and then pointed at the location of Pierce's temple. Magic. Ingest the divine thoughts. At this time, Pierce's brain was not dead, and with Russell's movements, a slightly transparent silver thread was suddenly extracted. After taking out 30 or 40 silk threads in a row, Russell stopped acting. At this time, the crystal bottle that appeared in his hand at an unknown time was already filled with Pierce's memories. What is it? Nick Fury asked curiously. Russell said simply, and Nick Fury's one-eyed eyes suddenly seemed to shine. No wonder he's excited. With this thing, he didn't have to worry about how to find the hidden Hydra high level. And Pierce's memory does not lie, which is much more reliable than torture. Strong strength, delicate mind. Nick Fury suddenly felt that he had underestimated each other before. At this time, Russell spoke again. Don't worry, I still need to make a meditation basin and use this prop to check my memory. It will take a few days. Nick Fury nodded, but suddenly remembered something, and immediately pointed to the Winter Soldier who was still pressed under the door. There should also be a lot of useful things in his memory, and he slaughtered it. You're so dark. Russell shook his head and said, he still owes an apology to a friend of mine, and I won't touch him for the time being. Of course, if he is not willing to sober up, I will send him to God and let him personally apologize to me. Nick Fury heard that there was something hidden in this and did not continue to ask. But at this time, Russell's words surprised him. What about your Skrullen men? Call him to play Alexander Pierce first. It should be able to stabilize the bottom and take a few days of buffering. As Russell spoke, he casually released magic flames to burn all the corpses except the Winter Soldier, and at the same time repaired all the damage to normal with a repair spell. Nick Fury here listened to the cold sweat. This is his last whole card. Never expected the other party to know. This group of mages on the mysterious side is really terrifying. No. Maybe it's just the person in front of you. Nick Fury didn't have any thoughts of denying it, and nodded directly. I'll just call him over and he'll be there in 10 minutes. Since it has been decided to take Russell as the leader, he will not engage in some small moves. So, Natasha, when will you put them back? Nick Fury asked cautiously. The bodies found by Pierce just now were actually all fake, and they were really transferred to the New York temple by the other party. Russell thought for a moment and spoke. Well, just today, there are just a few people who can let them know that I exist. Russell doesn't intend to let everyone know for the time being that he is the real controller of S.H.I.E.L.D., at least a level 7 agent. And the name S.H.I.E.L.D. is not very good. He also plans to change it. This he plans to think about slowly. Soon, a few minutes later, a human man in a suit walked in. After a few brief explanations from Nick Fury, the Skrullen first nodded to Russell, and then looked down at Pierce. A few seconds later, a new Pierce came back to life. At night, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Coulson, Barbara the Imitation Bird, and Deputy Chief Hill received orders from Nick Fury just after returning to S.H.I.E.L.D. Half an hour later, the group arrived at a secret base together. When they opened the last security door, they saw Nick Fury standing quietly on the edge of his dark walnut desk. Next to the other party, there sat a young man wearing casual sportswear who looked out of place with the environment. At this time, the young man was eating the steak slowly, as if he was the master of the place. Episode 32. Coulson hadn't seen Russell in previous invasions, so it was just a little strange at this point why the chief would stand by his side like a subordinate. But Natasha and the others changed their faces greatly after seeing it clearly, and instantly made a defensive posture, extremely nervous. I woke up inexplicably in a room before, thinking that it was the end of the matter, but I didn't expect to see each other again just an hour later. Take it easy, he's not an enemy. Nick Fury suddenly waved his hand, signaling several people not to be nervous. Hearing this, Natasha and the others slowly put down the weapons in their hands and looked at each other. both finding confusion in each other's eyes. At this time, Nick Fury's expression turned grim, and his expression became serious. "It's time to tell you the secret." Saying that, he turned slightly sideways, stretched out his right hand and introduced, "Let me introduce you, our real director behind S.H.I.E.L.D., Mr. Russell." At this moment, Nick Fury's words were like a thunderbolt on a sunny day, and the brains of several people who shook were a little confused. Everyone looked at the young man who was still eating steak in disbelief, and even saw that the other party waved hello to them. At this time, Hill, who was the deputy chief, spoke. "Sir, you're not joking, or he took you hostage." "It's a reasonable guess, but..." Nick Fury shook his head in denial. "You don't need to be tempted, I'm telling the truth. And haven't you ever wondered why you weren't injured from beginning to end?" "Oh, Barton, you didn't count if you hit it yourself." Natasha and the others glanced at each other and found that it really seemed like this. And not only that, not only did the other side not do any torture behavior, but also seemed to know the identity of each person. And such a permission is indeed only available to the top of S.H.I.E.L.D. Just then, they saw that the young man whom Nick Fury called the real chief had finally finished his steak. Russell wiped his mouth with a napkin, glanced at everyone calmly, and spoke. "Guys, sit down and talk." "Sit down? It seems that you alone have a chair, right?" Coulson wanted to complain, but he still didn't dare to speak. And at this moment, everyone saw Russell lightly tap his finger on the table twice. The next moment, the whole room quickly began to deform. Walls recede, the ground swims, and long tables extend. In the blink of an eye, it has changed from a small room of more than 30 square meters into a large conference room with an oval long table. Although he had experienced before, he still couldn't help but be shocked in everyone's eyes. "The scene in front of me is amazing." Natasha and the others took their seats in silence, waiting for the next explanation. At this time, Nick Fury took out a dice-sized holographic projector from his arms, and then spoke. "This time, sending you out on a mission is actually a bureau made by Director Russell." "What bureau?" the imitation bird asked in surprise. Nick Fury pressed the projector, and suddenly a hologram of Alexander Pierce appeared in midair. After seeing everyone's puzzled expressions, he said in a cold voice, "The role of this bureau is the biggest inner ghost in S.H.I.E.L.D., that is, Pierce, and his true identity is the supreme leader of Hydra." At this moment, the brains of Black Widow felt bombarded again. And this is not over. Nick Fury also said that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been infiltrated into a sieve by Hydra. At the same time, a large amount of evidence is also cast in the holographic projection. The room fell silent again. It wasn't until everyone digested the information and almost showed an ugly expression that Nick Fury comforted. "But you don't have to be pressured. The chief has obtained Pierce's memory, and the Hydra hidden in the shadows is all gone." When everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they heard this, their gazes changed when they looked at Russell. Especially Hill, the imitation birds turned into cats. At this time, I thought back to being stroked by the other party several times, and my face suddenly began to heat up, and I had a strong feeling of social death. "Doodle." Russell knocked on the table and after attracting everyone's attention, he spoke. "I won't be at the front of S.H.I.E.L.D. anytime soon, and the command of the mission to remove Hydra will still be done by Nick Fury." Seeing everyone nodding, Russell looked at Nick Fury and said, "Memory and meditation basin, I will bring it to you the day after tomorrow. You guys continue to study the details, I still have to go beforehand." After speaking, Russell's figure was directly entangled into a black shadow and disappeared instantly. Cool. What a dashing teleportation ability. As soon as Russell left here, Coulson lost the pressure, and suddenly sighed, not hiding the envy in his eyes. Then he looked at Nick Fury. "Sir, who is our Mr. Director?" It's not just Coulson who is curious, but so is everyone else. Especially the previous annihilation without resistance, it is still fresh in the memory. The other party is too strong. Nick Fury looked at everyone's curious eyes and smiled. "As you can see and think, the chief is a mage." Then his face became solemn again, and he said, "Friendly reminder to you, don't be upset because of what happened before. Behave well, maybe one day you will save your life because of this. You must remember that Director Russell is the reliance of S.H.I.E.L.D., and the real ultimate card." Everyone nodded. In fact, even if Nick Fury didn't say it, they wouldn't have mustered in their hearts. Everyone is a full-fledged agent, and before it was just a mission. Moreover, no one was injured. No, someone else was injured. Hill and the others silently looked at Hawkeye, whose face had not yet subsided. Hawkeye wanted to cry without tears. He didn't have any revenge at all, let alone beat it. After thinking about it, I could only ask weakly, "Sir, can I apply for injury funding?" Karmatage. Russell walked out through the temple gates. In fact, he can also choose to teleport, but as a non-staff member, it is somewhat impolite to do so, and it does not take much time to get from the main entrance. However, he had not been in the library for a few minutes when he was found by the king, saying that the Supreme Mage was looking for him. Russell was suddenly a little excited. He knew that Gooey was going to give him the reward he had promised before. Soon, Russell met each other in a rather zen room. Gooey still looked like a light wind, and after seeing Russell coming, he bowed his head slightly. "Are you ready?" Russell blinked. "Isn't it just to give a reward? What is ready? Is it rare?" And just when he was still guessing what it was, he saw Gooey slap his palm over. Russell's eyes widened suddenly, and at the same time, he found that he couldn't dodge at all. Bang! An inexplicable tremor occurred, and Russell had a moment of vertigo. When he came back to his senses, he suddenly found that his hands had become transparent. His body was standing still in front of him, and Fiorucci was looking at him with a smile. Russell immediately understood that this was his spirit body being shot out by Gui. What kind of reward is this? At this moment, he saw Fiorucci walk up to him with a smile and say the sentence just now. Ready? Russell suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. The scene in front of him was really familiar, and Strange seemed to have experienced it. Ready for what? Russell asked cautiously. Fiorucci smiled slightly. Of course, to help you repair planetary body projection. Episode 33. Can I study again tomorrow? It's late. Wait one. For a moment, Russell felt that his soul was suddenly stretched, and his vision became a wide angle, becoming extremely clear. Then, he saw the world that the mind could not imagine. The crimson and magnificent cosmic nebula, like a gap between hell, the mystery of the quantum realm, the mysterious dimensional transformation. Countless energies are madly entangled. The strange space seemed to move forward and backward at this moment, as if falling into an infinite mirror. Time had completely lost its meaning, and Russell felt as if he had become 10,000 and as if he had become one. Rumble. As if thunder sounded, Russell felt as if he was falling rapidly, and then saw Gui, who was observing him in front of his eyes. Not bad, I can withstand a few more times. How many times? The horizon has become even crazier this time. Russell even felt that he had traveled through the Egyptian god realm, through the branches of the world tree, through hell, through the dark dimension, across the crimson universe. Asgard, under the trunk of the manifestation of the world tree, Odin, the father of the gods, silently raised his head, and a golden lightning flashed in his wise one-eyed. A few seconds later, a look of surprise appeared in his eyes. It seems that you have found a replacement, but at this point in time that is about to be chaotic. Is it really good? At this time Odin suddenly remembered the green gem, and suddenly his mind changed again. Perhaps, I'm going to start preparing too. Above the bone throne, a man with red skin, a body as hard as a carving, and a head full of wild dancing seemed to sense something, grinning to reveal dense fangs. Dark dimension, a huge eye opened its eyes, emitting a purple light. It showed obvious thoughts, but closed again. In the red dim realm, a figure that seemed to have an infinite size shook gently. A hint of red mist escaped through a quantum-sized hole, and then disappeared. Karmatage. Wong didn't know when he came to Gui's side, and at this time he looked at Russell's body and said with a worried expression, normal people can't even bear it once, is he too many times? He feared that Russell's astral spirit body would collapse. At this time, Fiorucci slowly shook his head. It's okay, he's the most powerful human I've seen in thousands of years, and dimensional travel won't hurt him. It's a pity that most of my strength must be used to cover and hide, otherwise he can receive more breath. Hearing this, Wong nodded, and then the worry on his face turned into envy. He also wanted this experience, but unfortunately his spirit body couldn't withstand it at all. As for the reason for envy, this is a great gift. When Russell returns, it will be very easy to learn the magic of out-of-body exercises. Learning magic with spirit bodies will be extremely easy. Of course, that's not the point. The point is that from now on, the other party can steal dimensional energy for their own use. As an assistant to the Supreme Mage for dozens of generations, Wong certainly knew the secret of Gui's theft of dark dimensional energy. However, he is not rigid. In his opinion, this is both weakening Dormammu and strengthening himself, which is simply not too good. But this is not something that anyone can do. Normal people obtain dimensional power, such as the power of the dark dimension. Once absorbed, they will become the slaves of the other party, and life and death are controlled by the other party. The black magic dimension, on the other hand, will be corrupted and seduced by Sid Horn. The power of other dimensions is similar, and they will basically be subject to the master of the power in the end. Only like Russell now, on a dimensional journey, the soul obtains the breath of the dimension, so that after obtaining the dimensional energy, it can be completely used for itself. Of course, this is just a key, and how to steal it depends on me. At this moment, Wong felt even more emotion in his heart, and he felt more and more that his guess was right. There is such a powerful soul at such a young age, and a gift that the Ancient One has never had before. Thinking about it, Wong, who had divergent thinking, suddenly slapped his brain, and then hurriedly spoke. Almost forgot. Supreme Mage, Cassius expressed his dissatisfaction today. He thinks that letting a stranger have library access is against the rules of Karmatage, and I hope you can explain to everyone. Saying that Wang Xian was disdainful in the center, Karmatage had only one rule, that is, Supreme Mage Gui. These people don't know what happened 1,000 years ago, and it is simply wrong to think that Gui is calm and peaceful. Fiorucci still maintained his strength and didn't say anything, just nodded to indicate that he knew. 10 minutes later, Russell fell into his body in exclamation. In an instant, the unprecedented feeling of comfort appeared, like soaking in a hot spring when you were about to freeze to death in the coldest weather. Russell let out a long breath and opened his eyes. However, there was no longer Gui's figure in the house at this time. He looked outside and found that it was completely dark at some point, and he was not standing in the previous position. but sitting cross-legged on the ground. Just as he was about to leave, a magic book fell from the teleportation array that suddenly appeared on the desk in front of him. Russell turned the pages of the book and found that it was an out-of-body cultivation method. Episode 34. At a glance, Russell discovered that the magic that he could not understand before, and how to trigger the timing of the separation of spirit bodies, were all suddenly clear. About an hour later, Russell put down the magic book in his hand and closed his eyes. Unlike the obscurity of the past, this time he easily did it to empty his mind, and the whole person was plunged into meditation. Then in this state, he instinctively used his spirit to hook the magic power to touch the star spirit body. In the next second, Russell obviously felt the world tremble slightly, and when he opened his eyes again, he suddenly found that everything around him had changed. This feeling is like struggling out of a world full of white fog, and clearly seeing the unprecedented, starry sky universe. Not only that, but the most important thing is that Russell feels that his thinking has also become extremely clear, running rapidly, and some incomprehensible runes in his mind before suddenly opened up at this moment. At this moment, he finally knew why Strange practiced magic so quickly, and the out-of-body soul after helping Dewey was very different from the original. It was simply a bug. However, the current environment is obviously not suitable for continuing to cultivate. In the next second, with a gentle movement of his mind, Russell's spirit body submerged into his body. The next day, in the alchemy room of the Supreme Sanctuary, Wang watched Russell Xingyun scorch materials with magic flames, and his eyes were full of exclamations. He had thought that Russell would not have to live in Karmataj's library after learning to be out of body, and he would not waste any time. But I didn't expect the other party to look as usual, still step by step to carry out the matter at hand, not arrogant or impetuous. At this moment, he finally had to admit that even if he threw out his magical talent, he couldn't catch up with the other party in terms of mentality. This time he was really convinced. Russell was still preoccupied with making the meditation basin. He wanted to achieve success once, and did not see the exclamation in Wang's eyes. In fact, even if you see him, you won't feel anything to be proud of. In his opinion, there must be a beginning and an end to doing things. Since shield is in your hands, then you must do it well. And nothing can be done overnight, especially magic, and it is absolutely necessary to be anxious. That evening, Russell went to Tony's for more than an hour of lessons, and this time the explanation was more thorough. Subsequently, Russell cast a phantom transfiguration to shield. In the office, Nick Fury was already immune to Russell's sudden appearance, and immediately stood up after seeing the other party at this time, expecting it. "Chief, that prop is finished?" Although the pierce imitated by the scrolls can last a few days without showing his feet, but knowing the real situation of S.H.I.E.L.D. at this time, his heart was still very anxious. Russell nodded and took the meditation basin from one of his pockets. Nick Fury on the side blinked, and if he was not mistaken, his chief had just taken out a stone basin, the size of a basin, from a palm-sized pocket. As the king of agents, he thought of more than a dozen ways to do this thing in an instant. Russell saw at a glance that Nick Fury didn't hold any good farts, and directly broke the other party's fantasy. "Don't worry, ordinary people can't do it to persuade spiritual power, so at least until I improve it, you don't expect to use this thing." Space pockets are also products from the Harry Potter world. However, the material used to make the pocket must be the skin of a magical creature, and the maker must also have a good level of alchemy and master space extension spell casting. Russell made two, and the size of the space inside was about 20 cubic meters, which was not too big or small. One he left by himself, one gave Wang as a material fee, and the other party's face smiled into a chrysanthemum. It's a pity that there is no magic metal in the Supreme Sanctuary, otherwise it is far more convenient to create a ring than to carry it in your pocket. However, Russell remembered that Asgard had magic metal, and he would have a chance in the future. Then Russell wasted no time and kept putting Pierce's memory into the meditation basin for Nick Fury to watch the record. It took 3 or 4 hours, and the tired Nick Fury almost foamed at the mouth. But the good news is that all the Hydra high-ranking people are nowhere to be seen. Russell left the rest alone. Assassination, capture, lay out these things Nick Fury, this old silver coin is good at, will be handed over to the other party. After explaining the matter, Russell disappeared again with a phantom shift. Then his life suddenly seemed to return to plane and become extremely regular. Every day during the day at Karmataj I studied magic. At night I went to teach Tony the occult, and then I went to S.H.I.E.L.D. to read the report. The only wave was that sometimes Russell would see Cassius in the library. Russell sat in the depths of the library, and the latter stood on the outer floor with a magic book and looked at him angrily. Although there is no real harm, it is a bit diaphragmatic. It's a pity that Cassius didn't shoot or insult him, which made Russell feel a little pity and didn't have a chance to teach the other party a lesson. 2 weeks passed. In order not to hurt the vitality of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury's layout of Hydra is still proceeding slowly. Tony Stark is very talented and can already portray a complete magic array. As for Russell himself, it is also making rapid progress. Mirror space is already a beginner. At the same time, his exchange points have slowly grown to more than 900, and he estimates that he will probably be able to draw cards again in a few days. Just then, Russell got good news from S.H.I.E.L.D. side. Wanda Maximoff found it. This task was given by Russell long ago. Russell admitted that he was selfish in looking for Wanda. After all, such a big beauty said that it was if she was not moved. But this is not the main thing, there are other reasons. The first is that he really can't bear to see the other party's incomparably tragic fate. This woman has never had a good life in her life, especially in the end. Her cultivation of the dark divine book was corrupted and turned into a murderous maniac, which is simply outrageous. Second, if you can change the fate of the other party, then the exchange points obtained are definitely not a small amount. So no matter how you look at it, Russell feels that this matter is a win-win for himself and for Wanda. Soon, Russell received an email from Nick Fury. After clicking on, Russell scratched his head. This 16 years old? Episode 35. Although Wanda was only 16 years old at this time, perhaps due to his bloodline, he seemed to be not much different from 20 years old. As for how Nick Fury found the other party's traces, it is also very dramatic. It turned out that the brothers and sisters had joined Hydra 3 years earlier. Just yesterday, the two escaped during a S.H.I.E.L.D. siege of Hydra's plan. Later, the person in charge, Coulson, accidentally met the name Wanda Maximoff in the recorded escape list. It reminded him of a mission that Nick Fury had given not long ago. At the same time, combined with the list of Pietro's name, after a comparison of the report, it was sent to Russell. I didn't expect Wanda to take the initiative to join Hydra, instead of being captured for experiments. But Russell thought about it and found that it was reasonable. Because if you find that you can't take revenge, you will definitely agree to Hydra's solicitation. And now the two are on the run in a small country in Europe. Somewhere in Sunoka, Coulson recorded the room environment in its entirety on his phone, and then clicked send. And just after he did this, he turned around, and his hairline was almost frightened back 10 centimeters. Bureau. Managing Director. Coulson held back a tremor and spoke. Russell nodded and casually walked to the side of the sofa and sat down. Did you find out where? Coulson nodded, then shook his head. However, after seeing Russell's eyes, he remembered that it was not Nick Fury in front of him, and immediately straightened his attitude and said, "Since you gave orders not to hurt the two before, the agents did not follow too closely to prevent unnecessary engagement. Then, according to the plan, I originally wanted to poison the two of them by disguising after the other party entered the city." But a look of obvious confusion appeared on Coulson's face, and his tone was no longer so firm. But the two suddenly disappeared after entering the city, and they are still the kind without a trace at all. With all due respect, the combat qualities of these two brothers and sisters are very average, and it stands to reason that they cannot do this on their own. Russell frowned and asked, "So you suspect someone picked them up?" Hearing this question, Coulson's eyes became even more confused. According to normal analysis, it should indeed be so. But according to the information we have, the brothers and sisters joined Hydra in order to avenge Tony Stark, and they have not had any connections or friends over the years. So in real terms, it's impossible for anyone to pick them up. At this time, Coulson volunteered, "So do you want to call Black Widow over? She is better at tracking." Russell shook his head. Natasha was assisting Nick Fury, and transferring the other party at this time would disrupt the plan. Besides, it's not like I can't help it. After thinking about it, Russell asked, "Are you sure that the Wanda brothers and sisters definitely didn't go out after entering the city?" Coulson nodded, extremely sure. As an ancient city, Sunoka is not even half the area of Queens, and I'm pretty sure they didn't leave. That's good. Russell nodded, and then ordered, "Now immediately ask someone to buy a crystal ball and send it to me. Remember to be natural." Coulson didn't ask why, and immediately walked out. 20 minutes later, he returned to the room with a crystal the size of 3 fists. However, when he entered the house, he was stunned. He saw his own bureau chief sitting cross-legged on the ground, surrounded by a large number of text symbols that he did not recognize. "Give me the crystal ball." "Oh? Oh." Coulson carefully handed the crystal ball over, then retreated to the edge of the room and watched without blinking. "Blessed, today can see again. Natasha, they know that they will definitely envy me." Russell glanced at the honest-looking bald man, not caring about the other party's careful thoughts. He directly placed the crystal in front of him, and then raised his 2 arms. He will use a summoning spell from Constantine to summon the frail wandering spirits who have died but remain in the city. If Wanda is still in this ancient city, then surely these ghosts will definitely have seen it. Russell closed his eyes and began to unleash his magic. A.mosa.ka.la. As the spell appeared, those runes on the ground suddenly lit up, and lines began to appear between each other, and finally turned into a magic array emitting golden light. A fierce wind suddenly appeared in the closed room, as if a strange wandering soul appeared and began to whisper. "They are talking," as if supplicating. Russell nodded, and the next moment, the crystal ball immediately lit up as if it was echoing, emitting a soft light. At the edge of the room, Coulson's eyes widened as he covered his hair to prevent it from being disturbed by the wind. He knew what must be happening in the house, and although he couldn't see it, he was still excited. At this moment, Coulson decided that from today he would change his idol for the sake of his receding hairline, otherwise he would become English in a few years. He believed Captain Rogers would forgive him. Church of St. Cadurin. As a building built in the 13th century, it is not at all luxurious except that it is a little bigger. And as time passed, the walls became modeled today, and now only one gravekeeper remained in the cemetery not far away. Maybe it's because God has forgotten about it too. At this time, outside the church, two human beings, but one with a face covered in mold, and a figure shaped like a dry bone, were talking. The one who was shaped like a dry bone complained while biting the blood food that I didn't know what it was. The master is too careful. The human beings on this planet are so weak, since they have the opportunity to come over, they should be slaughtered and fed. The gravekeeper in this cemetery is too old and too unpalatable. The moldy man on his face suddenly smiled viciously. Indeed, it's so remote that no one comes at all. Or you go out to hunt, I'll stay here. And then you just need to pay me 100 souls. You know I can't eat anything else. Shaped like dry bones, it hasn't eaten humans for too long, but due to the coercion of the owner, it was still a little hesitant. But at this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded on the angel statue above them. Excuse me, have you ever seen a pretty girl with brown hair? Episode 36. The two demons suddenly looked up, and saw a human who seemed to be standing under the stars, quietly looking down on him. Human? No, it's a mage. They were neither afraid nor puzzled about how the other party appeared, and there was only a thick bloodthirsty desire in their eyes at this time. Corrosion demon, do you remember when the last mage soul was eaten? I forgot, but I still remember that kind of sweetness, and the taste simply fascinated me. Then remember, you don't make a move, otherwise my flesh and blood will be ruined, and I won't let you get a soul. Don't worry, I won't make a move. Hearing this, the bone demon smiled with satisfaction, and the corners of his blood-stained mouth grinned to the roots of his ears, revealing densely packed sharp teeth growing wildly. However, before he could say a cruel word, he saw that the human man did not hide the contempt in his eyes at all, and mocked. Are all the demons in hell as stupid as you two? The food also dares to taunt. The green eyes of the bone demon suddenly appeared fury, as if two ghost fires were swimming. I changed my mind. I'm going to break your limbs, and slowly taste your flesh and blood and fear. The moment the words fell, the bone demon's body made a clicking sound. The rotten flesh on his body fell, and in the blink of an eye, he changed from a body of less than 2 meters to a hideous demon with bone spurs more than 3 meters tall. At a glance, a vicious and violent aura rushed to the face. Call. The air seems to be cut, making a whining sound. The bone demon jumped up and swept away with a sharp bone claw. It's confident. The mage's body has always been weak, and the chanting of mantras is slow and long, and daring to get so close is simply looking for death. The corrosion demon on the side showed regretful eyes when he saw this. The long night thought I had fun, but it turned out to be a fool. However, the thought of the mage's soul that could be eaten soon suddenly became excited. The next moment, a red light appeared. With the sound of popping, a white bone arm more than a meter long whistled into the dirt. Then came the sound of a crash. The corrosion demon looked down and looked at the bone demon who had blown off his entire right shoulder and had dense cracks in his body, and his eyes were full of sluggishness. The result in front of him was completely opposite to what it thought, and the bone demon was almost killed in seconds. Impossible. The bone demon fell to the ground and roared, and the bloodthirst in his eyes had completely receded, turning into incomparable fear. At this moment, it heard the man speak again, still in a mocking tone. Are you demons so stupid that you don't take any precautions when attacking? Russell shook his head slightly. At the moment, this demon was not as combative as he thought. Although the creatures of the hell dimension will be suppressed after entering the human world, and their magic power has increased a lot this time, the other party almost didn't eat even a smashing spell, which still surprised him a little. It's too weak, and it seems to be very brainless, and it rushes straight over. But since there is already a noise, then a quick victory. At this moment, the bone demon roared, "Stop watching, idiot, let's go together." The truth of the lips and teeth is cold, and the corrosion demon also understands, and immediately his body turns dark green and rushes up. Then its afterglow saw its good brother bone demon, turned its head and rushed towards the church. Inside the dark church, a dozen candles burned. However, the fire does not bring warmth, but makes the atmosphere more penetrating. On the icon of Jesus, a woman chained to it is none other than Wanda Maximoff, who disappeared earlier. And on the pulpit not far below her, her younger brother Pietro lay on it weakly, covered in blood. At this time, a leisurely voice sounded. I was curious that my father suddenly became interested in an ordinary human woman and asked the knight to capture it. Can you tell me why? Wanda's eyes were full of fear, and she kept pleading. I don't know what you're talking about. I really don't know. Please don't hurt my brother anymore. The man in the black trench coat standing next to Pietro shook his head in disappointment. Wrong answer. Saying that, he stretched out 3 fingers and gracefully grabbed another piece of meat on Pietro's thigh, and then put it in his mouth. He asked again while chewing. You'd better think of something to tell me quickly, or your brother may not last long. Saying that, the black-hearted demon sucked the blood on his finger, and then revealed a terrifying smile. But it's okay, I'm still very good at torturing souls. That scream is wonderful, maybe you'll like it too. Hearing this threat, Wanda couldn't hold back any longer, and roared angrily, Devil! You are a devil. The black heart demon shook his head, and his tone was a little sour. Only my father can be called the devil, not yet. but who can say for sure what the future holds? The black heart demon said as he stretched out his finger again to tear off a piece of flesh, and the other party died in pain. The time was almost right. He planned to end the man's life, and then torture the soul, to stimulate the woman. Of course, he knew that the other party didn't know anything special about him, but since his father was looking for her, then the other party must have something special. But if it still doesn't work, he doesn't have so much patience, and directly kills and eats the soul. Not long ago, there was a small imperceptible hole in hell and the human world, which allowed him to come over. But he can't stay here for long, the loophole won't last long, and once it's closed, he can't go back. As for staying here, he is not one of those demons who have no brains and do nothing to know the next level. How could he do such a stupid thing? Even this operation was extremely secretive. But fortunately, he still found this woman in advance before the night. Wrong answer. After another question, the black heart demon grabbed Pietro's chest, and then clicked it one by one. He was going to take off the other's heart and feed the woman to eat it. On the statue of Jesus, Wanda saw such a scene and suddenly struggled madly, but no matter how hard she tried, she could not break free of the chains. She could only cry out in despair. Is there anyone who can save us? God, the demon is in your church, why don't you show up? Why? The black-hearted demon laughed wantonly. Because there is no God in this world, stupid woman. Saying that, his fingers began to force hard, suddenly piercing the skin, and blood oozed from Pietro's chest, which was constantly struggling. Seeing this scene, Wanda was even more crazy, and a faint red glow appeared in her eyes. However, the black heart demon did not notice this scene. At this time, he had stopped the movement of his hand and turned his head to look out. Seeing this, Wanda was stunned, and also looked in the direction of the church gate. In the next second, she first saw a burst of red light burst and explosion. A second later, the gate was slammed open, and the white bone demon who grabbed him, only more than half of his body, stumbled and ran inside. Wanda obviously saw that the monster wanted to speak, but at this time, a violent yellow light erupted outside the door, and then a red light like lightning crossed the space and hit the other party instantly. The previous explosion reappeared. The bone demon didn't even scream, and was directly blown apart and scattered bones. Wanda's eyes are full of disbelief. The next moment, she seemed to think of something, and suddenly her eyes were hot and she looked out with great anticipation. As footsteps sounded, Wanda saw by the light of the fire a man with an indescribable temperament step over the threshold and enter the church. In a trance, she seemed to see the other party smile at her, like a savior. Episode 37. Human mage? Not a father's lackey? A look of obvious surprise appeared in the eyes of the black heart demon. He thought that he could find himself at this time, and the only one who shot without any scruples was the evil spirit knight. And now a human mage has greatly exceeded his expectations. Although the two demons he brought this time were of average strength, not everyone could kill them in seconds. As for saying that the other party happened to be passing by, even the lowest level little horned demon would not believe it. The black-hearted demon turned his mind and did not attack, but smiled and seduced. I don't know why you are here, maybe we can talk. For example, there are no hell materials in the world, and I have a lot here. Of course, if you are good at black magic, then even a high-quality soul that has been tortured is not non-negotiable. This time he didn't want to make too much noise, which would inevitably shorten his stay in the human world, and maybe be found by the ghost knight. If you want to attract the attention of Karmatage again, it will be even less worthwhile. So, isn't it just trading? He will do this kind of thing. Of course, he can make such a big concession, mainly because the woman behind him is too tempting. A man that even his father was looking for, definitely has a big secret. Wanda, who also heard this, suddenly changed his face. The hope in his eyes quickly collapsed, and only a trace remained, and tears almost fell. In her opinion, no one will not want benefits, but risk their lives to fight a monster. Compared to an ugly deal, I still like beautiful girls to smile at me and say thank you. Listening to this ridiculous tone, Wanda not only was not angry, but the tears in her eyes instantly burst. Whether the other party also had a purpose or not, at least this moment she was really moved. Wrong answer. The black heart demon sighed, and then did not hide the killing intent on his face in the slightest. You should take advantage of your chances of surviving. Human. I'll give you the choice again, death or deal. What a low-level threat. Are you really Mephisto's cub? Russell resisted the desire to complain, thought about it and changed his words. If you give me your father's head, it's not impossible. Hearing this answer, the black-hearted demon suddenly revealed a demon face, and became extremely furious. He felt that the other party was insulting himself. If he can kill Mephisto, why come here to intimidate an ugly female? Find death. The black heart demon's feet shook, and his body suddenly turned into a black shadow, jumping up and down and left and right in a Z shape to attack Russell. He knows how to fight against mages. As long as he doesn't go head-on, then the opponent's spells will be difficult to hit him. Russell did not attack at will, gently raised it with one hand, and suddenly a stone wall rose up. Rumble. The stone wall shattered, and the black shadow broke through the wall, but then it was instantly hit by a red light. With a muffled sound, the black shadow was completely shattered, forming a spherical blood mist more than 4 meters high. Seeing such a scene, Wanda, who was tied to the icon, immediately showed joy, but in the next second, her face changed, and she called out anxiously, "Be careful." The globular blood mist did not scatter. With bursts of energy, countless painful faces continued to protrude on the surface of the blood mist, and then blood arrows with vicious curses shot out from the mouths of human faces. Russell's face does not change color. He was already prepared, and immediately leaned forward with 5 fingers and opened up. With the chanting of the mantra, in an instant, the blue magic array formed, like a shield against the front. Countless blood arrows hitting it could not even stir up ripples. But at this moment, the church dome suddenly appeared to break. The black-hearted demon crashed to the ground and stood behind Russell, with a thick sense of pride in his eyes. What just broke through the wall was nothing more than his flesh and blood curse, and he also cast illusions to make Wanda behind him mistakenly think that it was himself. And he himself went outside from the dilapidated dome of the church. After the flesh and blood magic broke out, he was caught between the 2 sides in the back. Die, mage. The black-hearted demon opened its hideous mouth without hesitation, and suddenly spewed out a strong crimson flame. This is pure hellfire, which has strong corrosive and painful properties in addition to high temperatures. Russell still stood still, resisting the bloody arrows in front of him, seemingly unable to be distracted. But just when the flame was about to come, his figure disappeared in an instant. In the next moment, the tip of a wand with a mysterious pattern touched the back of the Black Heart Demon. He never exposed the phantom transfiguration, just to be surprised. The Black Heart Demon designed him. I don't know that he is actually designing the Black Heart Devil. At the same time, Russell's chuckles also appeared. Isn't it hellfire? I'm sorry, I will too. After this period of Karma-Taj cultivation, Russell has successfully summoned Constantine's black magic hellfire and modified it to adapt to the Marvel Universe. At this time, as his magic power ran wildly, a circle of golden-red magic arrays with hundreds of runes suddenly formed in the center of the wand. The next moment, surging hell flames erupted from the tip of the wand, devouring the Black Heart Demon in the blink of an eye. Episode 38. The poles are reversed, and the flames kill each other. Wanda was stunned by this momentary battle change, and above her head, the red icon of Jesus hangs low, as if watching the screams in hell. But just a moment later, Russell's pupil miniature body disappeared again instantly, and then appeared more than 10 meters away. Rumble. In an instant, the entire dome of the church and the walls on both sides were shattered, the hellfire flew and dissipated, and the unpleasant smell of ink and rose began to appear. The Black Heart Demon has long disappeared. In its place is a monster that is vaguely more than 3 meters tall, with long hair with spikes, scarlet eyes, swollen muscles, and a long tail behind him. No, to be precise, this is the essence of the Black Heart Devil. Human, you completely angered me. The voice of the Black Heart Demon is full of anger and thick hoarseness. It raised its hand and pointed a finger, and suddenly a shock wave mixed in black energy shot towards Russell. The candles lit in the church had long been extinguished, and Russell didn't see anything in the night, but the inspiration instinctively felt wrong. As soon as the Black Heart Demon raised his hand, he switched positions again, this time not behind you, but overhead. Russell did not summon hellfire. He could see that the other party's form had great resistance, if not immunity. Thunderbolt explosion. As a flash of green light flashed, the bricks and stones under the feet of the Black Heart Demon exploded, erupting into countless flames. A thunderous sound sounded, bursting flames and dust intertwined. However, the screams of the Black Heart Demon did not appear, but countless black shadows roared out from inside, like souls struggling out of hell. Russell was just about to raise his hand to cast the spell again, but his face suddenly changed. The black-hearted demon appeared in front of him at some point, holding a huge battle axe in his hand and slashing at his head. Phantom Transfiguration. To Dumbledore's master-level spell casting proficiency, Russell didn't want to change his position again. However, just where he had just appeared, a ghost rose from under the stone bricks and tore at him in an instant, and the black-hearted demon in the sky turned into fiery red embers and disappeared at this time. It turned out to be an illusion. Russell did not panic and flew backwards sharply to avoid this tearing bite. Deep in the church, Wanda was relieved at first, but her eyes were already full of worry at this time, and she was extremely nervous. Even his brother, who fell to the ground and passed out, didn't notice. In her opinion, the battle situation at this time looks extremely bad. Although that man possessed the skill of teleportation, hundreds of hideous-looking black ghosts had already scattered at this time, and that monster also has the ability to create illusions and emit black shockwaves. At this moment, she saw the body of the Black Heart Demon tremble again, turning into 6 identical figures, and at the same time showing a smile full of malice. Such a scene made Wanda completely give up illusions. The thought of this being the only person in this world who helped herself, her eyes were filled with tears, full of determination. Without any hesitation, she shouted out in a crying voice, "Although I don't know what your name is, what kind of person you are, but please go quickly, leave me alone. Thank you, and please don't feel guilty." I'm already very content. At this moment, Wanda stared with teary eyes, wanting to imprint the other parties back in her heart, and wanting to die without forgetting this only man who risked his life to help him. Suddenly, she thought of something again and shouted, "That's right. My name is Wanda, Wanda Maximoff. What's your name?" Wanda watched expectantly, wanting an answer. However, the next moment, she saw the other party's figure flash, and actually appeared on her side. Wanda looked up and saw a pair of clear and deep eyes through the starlight, and was stunned for a while. Syllable. Ugh. The top of the head was lightly hit by the other party, and Wanda let out a short cry to come back to her senses. Russell withdrew his hand. "No good airway. What are you crying about? Do I look weak, chick?" After saying this, he ignored the stunned other party and turned around, looking at the ghosts flying in the sky, and the 6 black-hearted demons who don't know who their real bodies are. Russell no longer hides all his magic power. "Look at Wanda, don't blink." The next moment, Russell raised his right hand, and the tip of his wand suddenly bloomed with milky white light. Patronus charm, call God to guard. In an instant, the church was shining. In the looming chant, a 6-winged angel appeared in countless falling holy feathers, as if descending from heaven to earth like a miracle. And behind Russell, Wanda is completely sluggish. She twisted her stiff neck and looked at Russell blankly, only feeling as if she saw a god. In the next second, she saw the other party gently waving his wand, and suddenly the angel spread his wings and flew out. Countless screams and wails immediately sounded in the church. The ghosts and evil spirits summoned by those black-hearted demons were completely dissolved just by the thick milky white light around the angels, and those false illusions also turned into bubbles and disappeared. The black-heart demon let out an incredible roar, shouting the impossible, while frantically releasing a black energy shockwave. However, these shockwaves can only make the angel pause for a short time, and cannot cause harm. In the next second, he seemed to have lost his mind, and a roaring black flame burned on his body and rushed towards the angel. Bang! At the moment of impacting the angel, those black flames actually condensed into armor with strange patterns. The angel's body was knocked apart and turned into a violent breath, and then reunited inward again. But the purpose of the black heart demon has been achieved. He ran quickly, smiling wickedly while staring at Luo with scarlet eyes. No, not staring at Russell, but staring at Wanda. Russell has a teleportation skill that can be dodged at any time, and he can't kill at all. At this point, Wanda is his goal. He wants to kill the other party and eat her soul. He, the black heart devil, is still the winner of this battle. On the other side of him, Russell seemed to have no way. After all, Wanda is bound to the icon of Jesus, linked to the ground by the hellish chains of the black heart devil, and cannot move away with the phantom. But Russell still didn't move, and at this moment he was blessed, and finally knew what the ability that the 6-winged angel had not used last time was. He stepped forward to block Wanda, and a word came out of his mouth. Attack is also protection. As Russell's voice fell, the 6-winged angel that was still condensing behind the black heart demon scattered in an instant. They turned into milky white streamers, almost in no particular order, and instantly fell on Russell's body. Wait until the light fades like flowing water. The Karmatage combat uniform on Russell has disappeared, replaced by a sacred white armor. He holds the holy sword in his hand. 3 pairs of huge angel wings behind him are gently swaying. At this moment, he wants to judge the demon in the name of an angel. Episode 39. No way. Feeling the throbbing from the soul, the black-hearted demon stopped abruptly, and his heart almost collapsed. Facing Russell wearing angel armor, he felt a strong suppression at this moment, and the instinct of the high demon was in a crazy alarm at this time. Dangerous. As long as he rushes over, he will die. There is no such thing as any fluke. Although he was very unwilling, the black heart demon did not have any hesitation. He glanced at Russell deadly, as if he remembered the appearance of the other party in his heart, but then he didn't even say a cruel word, turned his head and rushed out without hesitation. At the same time, a large amount of black smoke and scarlet fiery embers began to burst out of the black heart demon's body. It's not an attack or defense skill, it's that he's going back to hell. The world is too dangerous, and he can only feel a little safe when he returns to hell. And seeing the black-hearted demon escape, Russell did not have a trace of anxiety on his face. It was not until the moment the other party stepped over the wreckage of the church threshold that he raised his head slightly. At this time, Russell's eyes lost their pupils and turned into a milky white bright. In the next second, the angel wings behind him trembled slightly. In an instant, a white meteor appeared to cut through the space and illuminate the night sky. Russell appeared above the black heart demon, holding up the holy sword to say the final judgment. You, guilty. As the layers of sounds with a roar fell, the body of the black heart demon, which had begun to blur, was instantly clear. The next moment, the holy sword fell, piercing the black heart through the chest. No, the black heart demon let out a sharp wail, and his body suddenly stiffened, and no more embers emerged. He will never go back to hell. The black heart demon knelt on the ground in pain, and his eyes were full of anger and regret at this moment. Why should I know the news of this woman? Why is there just an opportunity to smuggle into the world? Why is there such a mage who restrains himself? But as the strength in the body withdrew, the thinking became more and more obscure, and the emotions of anger and regret were withdrawn from the mind of the black heart demon. Now, all he has left is fear. I shouldn't have died here. I haven't killed Mephisto yet. I haven't sat on that throne yet. As the eternal darkness hit, the head of the black heart demon instantly lowered to his chest and quietly knelt on the ground. From this moment on, this great demon, who had a place even in hell, could no longer taste the soul and devour flesh and blood. He died on this starry night. Phew. Watching the black heart demon die completely, Russell let out a long breath. In the next second, the white glow in his eyes slowly disappeared, and the angel armor on his body and the wings on his back also completely dissipated. Maintaining this mode is still very mana-consuming. In fact, to be honest, he didn't expect tonight's battle to be so fierce. The main reason is that there is a particularly big deviation between the combat effectiveness of the Black Heart Demon and the Black Death Demon in his memory. Of course, it does not say that it is extremely dangerous. He still has a powerful fire spell that can burn everything. It's useless. However, this spell is too easy to cause accidental damage, and it is really inconvenient when there are teammates. This shows the difference between Dumbledore and Grindelwald, who is more powerful at playing black magic. Shaking his head, Russell stopped thinking about it. He did not forget the main purpose of this time, Wanda Maximoff. Russell rubbed his somewhat stiff face and showed a smile before turning around. However, in the next second, his body suddenly froze, and the smile he had just squeezed out froze on his face. He saw Mr. Pillot, who had been half dead before, and stood calmly in front of the broken pulpit. The other party was wearing a black suit, holding a gilded civilization staff in his hand, wearing a top hat, and looked at himself with a gentle face. Wanda, who was tied to the icon, had her mouth sealed by black mist, and her eyes were full of fear. Russell took a deep breath and didn't look at her, but instead looked at Pietro, guessing in a hoarse voice. Mephisto? Pietro took off his top hat, first smiled and nodded, and then sighed. The young people now are really terrible, and I feel fear when I look at that sword. It's really amazing. Hearing Mephisto's praise, Russell felt a pang of slander in his heart. Still feeling scared? He would be a fool if he believed it. Only, why did the other party appear here? Russell showed a wry smile on his face. In the face of this kind of big guy, he was not arrogant enough to think that he could defeat the other party, but escaping him is still very confident. Because the other party must not have all the strength to come. This is something he can be 100% sure of. It's not that you don't want to, but you can't. The barriers of the three supreme sanctuaries are not decorations. Russell didn't speak, silently delaying time and waiting for the big guy. He didn't want to give up Wanda. Mephisto didn't seem to see Russell's intention, but just smiled. Speaking of which, I haven't thanked you for killing this villain, but it saved me a lot of trouble. If you don't dislike it, I can give you strength. Saying that, Mephisto pulled out a piece of parchment with flames from the void, covered with beautiful patterns. Russell's eyelids jumped. Isn't this supposed to be the contract of the Black Spirit Knight? Seeing that Russell did not answer, Mephisto did not care at all, but asked with interest. It is said that there is no God in this world, and the prayer on earth is only the power of Ashita's vein. However, I can smell that the divine power in your body obviously does not come from her. So, where does your power come from? At this moment, Mephisto's last words seemed to come from the filthy and depraved language of the depths of the abyss, carrying a terrifying power of temptation. Russell's eyes immediately became a little dull, but almost instantaneously, there was a clear look of struggle again. Seeing that Russell could resist, Mephisto suddenly had a look of surprise in his eyes. Such a powerful star spirit body. It seems that woman was a dimensional journey for you before. This is even more impossible. Rumble. At this moment, the space suddenly trembled violently without warning. In the next instant, a flame giant sword fell from the sky and accurately penetrated Mephisto's. Episode 40. The whole night brightened up in an instant, and the blazing fire illuminated the sky. Russell's eyes instantly regained clarity, and he saw the incomparably magnificent magic in front of him at a glance. And Mephisto, who had almost overshadowed him just now, was pressed to the ground by the impact of the golden flame at this time, and the face on his face was constantly changing. This is the sword of the Emperor of Vishan. Isn't it supposed to be more than a meter? Russell's mouth opened slightly, and he looked at the flame saint sword that was almost 10 stories tall in front of him in disbelief. The same magic, Strange must be so fierce when he fights Thanos, why not lose? By this time, he had already guessed who was coming. Sure enough, the next moment, Guyi's figure appeared in the flames, with his hands behind his back, coldly looking down at Mephisto. Mephisto trembled and raised his head little by little, but when he saw Guyi's face, his pupils shrank, and he suddenly cursed angrily. Sure enough, that idiot of Dormammu doesn't know how much dark dimensional power has been stolen by you. It's just a waste. Otherwise, I will definitely have a big gain today. Hearing Mephisto's angry and corrupted voice, Russell suddenly felt better. Then he followed the other party's gaze and looked closely and found that a black rune was shining on Guyi's forehead. Russell was a little puzzled. I don't know if it was an illusion. He felt that the rune he saw now was far clearer and more powerful than what he saw in the film and television. Coupled with the terrifying Wei Shan Emperor sword in front of him, Russell suddenly had some doubts. How could such a big guy be killed by Cassius at that time? Suddenly, he thought of a possibility. Could it be that this old lady suspended animation in the original timeline? and then put the burden on Strange and dashed away? The corner of Russell's mouth twitched, and the more he thought about it, the more likely he was, and he felt that even if it was wrong, he would not be far away. How dark the old ladies are. As for whether it feels that using the power of darkness is wrong, he is not such a stereotypical person as Mordo. Even Russell felt that if he had the opportunity, he would not even steal Dormammu's home. Here, Gui showed a mocking smile after hearing Mephisto's roar. Perhaps, your Hell Lord is not smarter than Dormammu. I just left a small opening, and you smelled and pouted your ass, and followed. Since you like the world so much, then the power that came this time will stay. Mephisto was furious. You're fishing me. Although he did not come from the body, only a trace of power came. But being slaughtered as a sheep is still unacceptable. What's more, the other party also compared him to the fool Dormammu, which is simply insulting him, a great devil known for his wisdom, insidious. It's too late. Gui sneered, crossed his fingers with his hands, and suddenly dozens of golden magic arrays of different sizes and shapes condensed into shape. The next moment, Pietro's body floated, a large amount of black smoke began to come out, and a few seconds later, he turned into a demon with scarlet eyes and smoke form. Of course, Mephisto will not sit still, and the body surface lights up with a large number of mysterious patterns. It didn't feel like it could escape, but wanted to self-detonate its energy. Having said that you are as stupid as Dormammu, you think I will make you successful. Gui suddenly put both hands together, and suddenly all the magic arrays overlapped and transformed. In an instant, a box made of golden magic imprisoned Mephisto inside, and then continuously shrunk to the size of a palm. In the next second, the Flame Saint sword that had been suppressed from beginning to end began to collapse and shrink, forming a golden flame and disappearing into the box. Mephisto didn't even scream, and directly turned into the most primordial source power. It's miserable. Watching Mephisto's being played by the old ladies, Russell felt a chill in his back. He felt that he would have to be more or less polite and respect the other party in the future. As we all know, the Supreme Mage's heart is small, and he will be finished if he is put on small shoes. It's a pity that Gui's side doesn't know what Russell is thinking. Otherwise he will definitely summon another holy sword. She put away the magic box in her hand with her backhand, and then lifted her other hand slightly, and the parchment that suddenly fell to the ground flew into her hand. Only then did she look at Russell and say, "The power in this contract is good. I will deal with it first and then give it to you, just as you can kill the Black Heart Demon." Saying that, Fiorucci raised his hand to open a portal and walked in. However, the portal did not close directly, and Fiorucci paused and turned his back to Russell. This time it did a good job. After praising this sentence, the portal disappeared. Hearing this, Russell scratched his head and looked kind. How embarrassing it is to boast so much. I just don't know how old. Bah. I just don't know what kind of power Master Gui will turn the parchment into next, and I'm a little looking forward to it. But he wasn't in a hurry. Although tonight was a bit thrilling, he also gained a lot of exchange points. Especially killing the Black Heart Devil is enough to give him 2,800 points. Coupled with the fact that there were more than 700 points left before, he can now randomly 3 times with just the character card. He plans to go back and start the simulation in a moment. Russell silently thought in his heart that in the future, he would definitely go to hell to cut off Mephisto's head as a pot for the night. Of course, he was definitely not careful to avenge tonight's revenge, and he wanted to do this just to fulfill the wish of the Black Heart Demon. As we all know, the dead are big, as they should. Woohoo, woohoo. It wasn't until he heard the voice that Russell came back to his senses, and then he saw Wanda looking at him aggrievedly.